Why was the relief scheme for small businesses not yet being implemented? The Liberals on what did Harriet Harman actually mean when she said Fred the Shred, as we call him affectionately, the former head of Royal Bank of Scotland, should not count on enjoying his rather large pension. But the fireworks, the theatre, was concentrated on Harriet Harman and the teasing of her leadership ambitions, if she has them. She dismissed them as gossip. Of course, some gossip can be true. Much of it isn't. We'll speak to our panel in a moment to get their feel for this. What did you feel, though?
Well, Si in Peterborough says, what a match. 40 love to William Hague, stuttering, unsure, flummoxed. It wasn't a good day for Harriet. Gareth in Sussex says, William Hague was throwing banana skins on the floor. Harriet Harman slipped on each and every one. Clear win to the opposition this week. John Clark says Harriet Harman's display has just cost her any hope of leading the Labour Party. David says William Hague stands in the House and with his Chamberlain Churchill, Eden Macmillan jibes, boasts and brags with pride about Tory failures and treachery. Of course, he's a loyal deputy because he was a complete failure as a leader. So I think that's sort of a fair reflection, actually, of the percentages. The vast majority of people today
We're critical of Ms Harman.
Very critical. Yeah, only a few praising her.
I've been to suggest, Kevin, this is an example of where the Westminster Village, to which politicians and journalists belong, and the country at large, which we've seen from these emails, will differ. I suspect the Westminster Village will see that Miss Harman actually did her prospects of a leadership potential no harm today at all, maybe even boosted them.
Yeah, I thought of getting down on William Hills and putting a tenner on her. I thought she did rather well and actually floored him twice, coming back with good bits of research on the when he was calling for deregulation, not regulation, and also the fact he's pocketed £30,000 from the Royal Bank of Scotland. Not quite Jackie Stewart's $4 million, it must be said, but it embarrassed William Hague. But it seems people who've been watching on TV at home have seen it differently.
Why is that, do you think? Is it just because those that took the trouble to email, and of course it's not exactly a scientific selection, they just don't like Harriet Harman, even when she performs well, they don't give her any credit.
Yeah, they may not be representative, but we'll just take it that they are, because it's easier that way. And I think Harriet Harman has got a public persona that has turned people off. The Tories and some people in her own party have painted her as a very bossy, privately educated, posh woman who always wants to interfere in your life and nanny you and order you around. I think a lot of that is unfair, but there's also an element of truth in bits of it. And she'll find it very hard to shake off. Now, she could win an election within the Labour Party, as she did for Deputy Leader, possibly Leader after the next election. We'll see what happens. But she'd find it, I think, harder to sell herself to the country as a whole.
Was her leadership campaign helped by today's performance?
I thought it was a solid performance. I'd be very interested in the gender balance of the responses you got, because Said said something very interesting off air, which is in the testosterone-filled atmosphere of the Commons. It is difficult for a woman, more difficult, I think, but I think that was a solid performance, as Kevin said. Although I have to say, Kevin's theory that there is a leadership campaign underway seemed to be based on a few drinks he had in a bar last night, and this is exactly where this gossip comes from.
Excuse me, he's a political journalist.
Ben, come on, I speak to people. We know, she said political gossip 3 times. She didn't say absolutely no, it's not true. And let's face it, Harriet Harman is part of the London dinner table set. She's on that circuit.
I very much doubt whether she had time to spend very much time at dinner parties at the moment. But look, any politician at this stage, when we're trying to tackle with a deep financial crisis, who gives the impression that they're jostling for position, that is not what the British public want to hear, or not what the Labour Party wants to see either.
Your line manager in Downing Street thinks she's up to something.
Who's the line manager in Downing Street?
Gordon Brown, Downing Street, thinks she's up to something. They have been.
I see.
Yeah, they have been words.
So Gordon Brown's the line manager.
He is the line.
I thought it was the fat controller, but it's not. It's the line manager. I see. Could you see Harriet Harman leading the Labour Party?
I think if you look, question time was actually very good today, Prime Minister's question. There were some serious subjects. But as I was saying to Ben, it's important that we criticise Harriet Harman for her position on policies and not because she's a woman, to kind of say she's bossy or she's shrill or she's... I think Westminster has to be very, very careful, because I find consistently that when there's an attack upon female politicians, it's on a personal level, whereas when there's an attack on male politicians, it's more to do with policy.
Really?
I disagree with it. I disagree with...
Isn't Gordon Brown complaining because we all said he's too fat? Wasn't every attack on John Prescott personal? We didn't care about his politics.
Yes, but I
was
think
all personal.
no. I think it's quite nasty when the attack is against women. I think
But wasn't
there are huge
nasty
issues
against
of
John
policy.
Prescott?
I think there are huge issues of policy which I fundamentally disagree with Harriet, and we can attack her on that. But I think it would be wrong to attack her because she's.
We accept that. We're just not sure that there's a gender distinction here. Men get a pretty good kicking for their personality or appearance in the Commons as well. Let me come to an issue that wasn't discussed today. Caroline Spellperson. You know, I use the politically correct name for her. I think others call her Spellman, but Caroline Spellperson. She's the one that used public money to kind of pay her nanny.
Nanny on the taxpayer.
Nanny on the taxpayer. She's now been told by the authorities to pay a chunk of it back, think about $9,000. Yeah. Is that now the end of it?
It seems to be £9,600. A lot of the conclusions of the report were quite easy on it, said it was very unintentional. I think a lot of people will wonder, how can you unintentionally claim £9,600 on the taxpayer? You have to pay back. I think the Tories have spun this brilliantly, and I understand they ran rings around the Labour MPs on the committee.
Really?
And it was almost as if the Tories were whipped. I'm sure that didn't happen because it's not allowed to happen on the Standards Committee. Knew what they were doing. And I know the Tory spin doctors were out in force well in advance of the publication of that report at the peculiarly late time of 6 p.m. last night, so no one could really read it and digest it properly before writing about it in the morning's newspapers.
You see, the public won't see this in party terms. They'll see one MP paying for her nanny off the public purse, and they see another MP, who's also the Home Secretary, saying that the cubbyhole she lives in her sister's house in London is her main residence when she's got a huge house in Redditch in her own constituency.
Yeah, no party has a monopoly on this bad behaviour, and it brings all politicians and politics and democracy itself into disrepute. And how MPs do not see themselves as voters I don't get it.
Got any nannies on the public purse?
No, I haven't. I mean, I've been one of those people who has constantly argued for more openness and transparency and exposures. We did actually vote for that in spite of one or two people trying to give MPs an exemption under the Freedom of Information Act. So all of this is in the public domain. I think the thing that people often forget is 12 years ago, none of it was.
We knew we didn't even know this was going on.
Nobody knew what anybody was claiming. Sure. And in a way, we've become victims of our own openness. It's not open enough, it's not transparent enough, and also the rules are completely opaque. I mean, this rule over where your main home is can be interpreted in so many different ways, and this just causes all sorts of trouble.
We have to move on. Kevin, thanks for joining.